2, we get the scoop on how you can build your resume, interview for success, and ultimately advance in your career. This is Inside TechCom with Zohra Mutabana. Let's get started. Hi, Denise. Good morning.
Good morning, Zohra. How are you?
I am doing excellent. Thank you for joining me on this nice, warm Sunday morning.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's warm even here in Cleveland, Ohio. So I think we're about the same this morning.
Yes, we're in the 70s, but we are expecting 3 digits later today. So I'm looking forward to getting toasted. So Denise, thank you for being on my show and share with us a little about yourself.
My background educationally, my degrees are in English. I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in English. My first job out of college, I actually worked as a journalist for several years before moving to TechCom. And Blackbaud actually, when I left journalism and moved to TechCom, Blackbaud was the company that hired me, and in my opinion, took a little bit of a chance. Journalism and technical writing were, especially then, very different. And I've now worked in the field for 23 years, all 23 of them with Blackbaud. The nice thing is too, especially having participated for that long, is like, I feel I came into technical communication just as the profession was starting to explode into a much larger, broader arena, right?
Right.
When I first started at Blackbaud, we were working in Microsoft Word. We were creating tech pubs, that went off to the printer, and we had all these little manuals that we put into boxes and stuff. And the week I got hired, they were moving to like embedded help systems. They were still going to do the tech pubs, but yeah, before I even started with Blackbaud, they put me into training for FrameMaker because that was the big move at the time. It's like, ooh, we're leaving Word and we're going to FrameMaker, and we're going to have these embedded, help systems, and so that was pretty cool. So I went from the tech pubs and Word to the creating help systems and FrameMaker, and then it was maybe 10 or 11 years after that when our products just became so complicated. It's like, we needed single sourcing, we needed granular reuse, we needed web-based content. And then we made the big move to Flare. And now we're just kind of even, it's great watching it broaden out even more from there. Because as you know, right, we're technical writers on our team, we're content designers on our team, we were all involved in usability. So many of us are involved in, UX chores like discovery. We wear UX writer hats. It's just really exciting. And it's just so broad, and it's a delight coming to work.
That is so true. And, as you were sharing your background with me, taking a chance, whoever hired you, and then how the field has broadened. Those two things, I think, pretty much sum up our field today.
That is true.
Right?
Right. Without a doubt.
Absolutely. So you worked as a journalist. What sort of prompted you to switch to technical writing?
Oh, man. Well, this is the thing, too, right? When I switched, I was switching from a profession that I really loved. I really did enjoy being a journalist. And I was allowed to cover stuff that I really enjoyed, primarily politics. I was a politics writer for the newspaper. But the salaries were just terrible. The hours were unbelievable. You work roughly 60, 70 hours a week, and, you make peanuts. So it's not really good for family life. Plus, my partner at the time she was just hired as a professor at the Citadel. So I needed to find a job in Charleston, South Carolina. And it's funny because I tried really, really hard to find a job in journalism, but it just wasn't working out. And I said, well, you know what, this company Blackbaud is hiring. Let me see what happens. And I was stunned. First, I was stunned when they called me for an interview. And then I was even more stunned that evening when they called me at my hotel and said I had the job. But it's all worked out terrific.
I mean, of course, I work with you today, full disclosure, right?
Yes.
And we are on the same team, and it's been fantastic working with you. And for listeners, we have a concept at Blackbaud called office hours. And there, Denise and a few other members of our team lead a discussion around UX. And we will get into that, as in not the office hours per se, but how do we hire for these different talents that we have on our team. But a fascinating story, Denise, with, how you moved. So for our listeners, we are on season 2. So we've moved on from professional journeys. Denise is one of the team managers, and we are here with Denise to really understand how the hiring process works. What sort of talent is she looking for when she's doing a backfill for a tech writing position? So that's what we are going to be talking about. But thanks, Denise, for sharing with us what your journey has been like. I mean, obviously, you started off 23 years ago as a new technical writer. I mean, brand new, right?
Oh, yes.
And today you're a manager. What has that been like? Because you probably, like you said, you've had to pivot constantly, not only learning new tools, but even in terms of probably the mindset that was required.
And I use the word mindset, and I'll start there. I've told this story before, and it's true. So, I told you how much I loved my job in journalism, and when I got the position in technical writing, I was happy because money was substantially better. It was more of a regular hours. I was able to live in the city with my partner, but I was not happy as a technical writer my first couple of years, and it was a mindset issue. It's because I was coming from journalism. I took that job. I approached that job as a profession. And I don't know what I was thinking when my first maybe 2 years as a technical writer, and this was certainly not Blackbaud's fault. This was entirely me. But, I was just kind of like a clock puncher, I felt. And then I approached my manager one day. I saw that I didn't even know what the STC was, the Society for Technical Communication. But as part of our employment at Blackbaud, we all had memberships. And so, we got these magazines, the Intercom, and the Intercom came, and there was going to be this conference in Chicago. This looks cool. I like Chicago. I could probably use some training. So I approached my manager and she let me go. And even though, I can honestly say I didn't go to that conference that seriously, but within a few sessions of sitting at that conference, my mindset changed. All of a sudden, I was just shocked to find out. And even back then, we're talking, 21 years ago, I was just shocked to see just how vast and energetic the field was, and how seriously these presenters took their positions, and how they enjoyed doing the research and whatnot. And that was a big eye opener for me. And after that, I'd say that's when I really started getting interested in doing research in the profession. It's like, okay, what are the trends? Where are we going next? What can I do to up my technical skills? So when it comes to becoming an information architect, that's what changed for me. All of a sudden, I was doing research. All of a sudden, I was continuing my education. And then we ran into a bad experience where we really outgrew our existing authoring process. The one I mentioned before, when they hired me, we were doing FrameMaker. We did because of the number of products. We really, really needed to move to something that had granular research, that was web-based, that was modern. And nobody assigned me the task. I do remember that. It was just something I was interested in. And again, my mindset had changed, and I ended up being really, really involved with helping our group make that shift. And that's how I kind of got into information architecture. I didn't even know that such a role existed. My manager at the time, who is now our director, he promoted me, and I was shocked. I said, "Oh, information architect, this sounds cool," But that's how that came about.
The field of technical communication is a niche field, and it's pretty well understood to some extent when you say technical writer. But there are these other hats that we wear: information architect, content strategist, content developer. There are so many of these, which we are doing in our day-to-day lives, right, at our jobs. Can you speak a little bit about what, in your opinion, is information architecture, and why would it be important for a business?
Well, information architect, it could be many different things. But for me, my job as an information architect, it's primarily keeping track of, it's got, I guess, more of a stronger content strategy, content management component. A lot of it is how we present the content, right? Exactly what the title says. How are you going to architect this content so that readers are going to read it? And actually, now that, which I know we'll talk about in a few minutes, but now that we also wear UX hats, that has become even more important, is, how do we architect this stuff so people read it? But at the time I got the position, it actually had more to do with understanding how the content was created and how we can create that content, giving us more options publishing side.
You sum it up really well. And using the quote unquote, the word architect for UX, I love it, because this is where we sort of bring to the fore how technical writing is evolving and what sort of talent would be required to take this field ahead. And how can our listeners sort of, if they have these skills, they could benefit from this discussion, hopefully. So great. This is all great stuff, Denise. But I do want to ask, you are a speaker, a prominent speaker, so to speak. Did that happen? Is that something that your manager pushed you, or did that just happen? Can you share something about that?
Yeah, it truly just happened. And as a matter of fact, it kind of goes back to the story I said too. When I had that switch flip on me, and all of a sudden I started, this is really a profession, and it's a great profession, and look at all these great things we can do. And so you guys are all going to laugh. But again, remember, I've been doing this for 23 years. At the time, one of the big areas of research at that time was indexing. because we still had, we still had hard-covered books, and the indexes were important. And the tools at the time were just not that great at indexing. So, creating good, useful indexes was not an easy task. So it was one of the areas I started researching in, and I enjoyed doing it. And there was an STC, a regional STC conference at Mercer College in Georgia, which was not a long drive from Charleston. And I don't even know what possessed me to do it, but on a fluke, I said, hey, I could present on indexing, and they accepted me. To be honest with you, Zora, I don't remember if it went well, if it went bad. All I remember is when I was done, I was just a bag of nerves, and I said, I'm never doing this again. But, I'll be honest with you, when you do keep up with the field and you do your research and you do enjoy what you're doing, it was hard not to do it. I mean, I think it was just a natural outgrowth, because even after that, they said, I really don't remember what the experience was like for the users. I mean, they may have loved the presentation, they may have hated it. All I know is I was miserable and I wasn't going to do it again. But, about a year or two later, I was at the national STC conference presenting on some stuff we were doing in FrameMaker. And again, even after that experience, when I got done, I remember finishing that and saying the same things, like, well, okay, I did it again. I'm never doing this again. And here I am, right? I mean, I'm doing a 3-hour workshop in 2 months for a LavaCon. So as you can see, I've lied to myself after every presentation when I said I'm never going to do it again.
I happened to attend one of your presentations a few years ago, and I'm thankful that you did not give up on it. And I took a lot away from it. I think it was about flair at the time. So thanks for continuing to present. We definitely benefited. I was one of the audience and I've benefited. So there is your confirmation, validation, hopefully.
Oh, no, I appreciate it. You're really very sweet. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So, how has that propelled your career? Has it, being on the scene, so to speak, has that contributed to your success, would you say?
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. One of the good things about doing these presentations is it requires a good deal of preparation on your part. And without a doubt, that preparation has benefited me professionally at Blackbaud. Plus, I mean, as you know, from working on our team, we're encouraged at Blackbaud to present our work. I mean, this is something that we're not pushed out there to do it, but if you do it, I mean, they're thrilled. So, there's the encouragement on the Blackbaud side. There's the side effect. It's like, when I get done prepping for a presentation, and this is a presentation that, you've gone into it already thinking, oh, you know what, I'm pretty smart on this subject. I should be good, which is the whole reason you put a proposal forward to present on it. But by the time you finish preparing, your knowledge on that subject has increased twofold at least, and a huge help professionally.
Yeah. And the reason for asking this question for the listeners is, when you are thinking about progressing in your career, this is one way to self-learn.
Oh,
and that, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what you shared with us, that you think but you learn so much more when you prepare yourself and then you present. So that's one way. And since the focus of the season is career advancement, this could be one way. Not everybody wants to do it, but if you have the knowledge on anything, don't hesitate to share. This will definitely help you progress in your career, regardless. Apart from what you can do with your resume and the whole preparing yourself for the hiring process, this is one way, again, to prepare for that next big gig.
Along the same lines of, what your manager probably wants to hear and not want to hear when it comes to professional development is, I think, being self-motivated and self-guiding is going to be key to your success. All organizations need to make their framework for promotions and whatnot transparent and available and understood. But at the end of the day, when you've got folks on your team saying, okay, I want to move to the XYZ role, what do I need to do? Don't expect your manager to tell you, step by step what you need to do to get to that level. And I think this is a good way to motivate yourself. And some of the best things that have happened to me happened by accident, just because I was motivated to continue learning. And just the good stuff that came was just a nice side effect of doing that. So, self-motivation and understanding the profession, understanding what you want and what's going to benefit your company. I mean, that's huge.
You hit the nail on its head. So I'm not even going to sort of delve into this, because you just brought the why behind it to the fore. That's fantastic. Denise, we definitely want to talk about the whole hiring process, right? Because we're talking about career advancement and professional development. Now, you are a manager and you definitely manage a team, and the hiring process for you specifically, I'm just going to sort of jump a few steps ahead and ask you, when you are looking for a candidate to be on your team, What are you looking for?
Well, we're looking for somebody who understands the field, and they demonstrate. There's a demonstration in that resume that they understand the field, and that they, as I said before, they understand the field, they're self-motivated, and they're educating themselves. The one thing that's going to kill you is if you do anything on the resume that suggests you're stagnant. And having looked through tons and tons of resumes over the last several years, one of the worst things you could do is just lead with the fact that I have been a senior technical writer for 20 years. And then we look at your experience and, it's like you've spent 20 years doing the same thing. At Blackbaud, that's not going to make you a senior technical writer. That's going to make you an entry-level technical writer. We don't care how many years you've had. But, our field is vast and our field is complicated. And that's what we want to see in your resumes. The fact that, you created the installation guide for this complicated piece of machinery, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, that's great. But again, you have to demonstrate an understanding of the field.
When you say demonstrate, you said stagnant, and you've talked about what stagnant looks like. What would you like to see for somebody if you're backfilling for a senior tech writing position? What is it that you want to see that will say, okay, this person is self-motivated?
Okay, this is an extreme example, right? This is not what everybody has to do to prove, but we've just had a little bit of a growth spurt. So I have 3 new members on my team, and 2 of those new members, one of them comes from the education fields, school teaching. The other one is a senior technical writer. She's been doing technical writing for a long time, but they took advantage of the COVID shutdowns. They went to coding school. Again, a teacher, right? A teacher went to coding school. Do you know how hard coding school is? And these were 100% online, self-driven, self-motivated, self-paid for, and they did it and they completed them. Now, when you see that on a resume as a hiring manager, you're going to be pretty impressed. But like I said, those are extreme examples. When it comes to, just about, I'm trying to think of what a more real world example would be. Like I said, I've just been lucky because these are the last 2 people I hired for my team had this type of background. But, an understanding in UX writing and understanding the new trend, or one of the new trends in technical writing right now, has to do with writing for for bots, chat bots. That's a whole different type of writing, right? Yeah, it's right. Conversational design, again, putting little nuggets like that in your resume that suggests that not only do that this exists, and maybe that you've taken some steps to educate yourself on these trends is helpful. I hope that answered the question.
Yes, it absolutely did. And it shows the variety of background that we bring to the table. And we are trending towards UX. Our team focus is right now to do UX writing. How does coding lend to UX writing? Do I go to coding school now to become a UX writer? So I think my question is more geared towards that how do you sort of build that experience to get that break, even if you've not been doing UX writing?
Yeah, the coding example, no, you don't have to go to coding school to be a UX writer. I think that was just an example of 2 individuals who are very self-motivated to learn. And of course, since these folks have joined our team, they've both been very self-motivated to learn UX writing. And they've done a terrific job. I mean, they've both come along just fantastically in that process. I think when it comes to UX writing, I'd have to say overall, our group at Blackbaud, we've been doing this. We really started, pushing to where, I think we officially started wearing the hat around January of this year. We've had great luck because we've got so many talented people. Again, right, when we're looking for new hires, we're not looking for the person who's been spending 22 years doing the same thing. We're always looking for people who are trying to expand their horizons, who are trying to learn new things. And as a result, we've got a lot of great people on our team now who, when we said, okay, you know what, we need to take ownership of this UX text. We need to take ownership of this text. We did a little bit of internal training, but most of it was self-taught. Like you said, too, we do the office hours where we kind of swarm around a problem and see the best way to address it. But no, when you're looking for somebody, granted, if I look at a resume and it says, I've had 20 years UX, probably not 20 years. If I've been doing UX writing for the last 2 years, that's a big plus. But when it comes to what suggests you're going to be good at doing this, again, it's the variety you've got on your resume and just demonstrating your willingness to learn new things.
Yeah, thank you, Denise. I sort of didn't mean to put you in the hot seat by asking that question, but what you answered, what you really brought out to me was how these candidates, these individuals that have joined our team have been self-motivated to go seek their answers. And UX writing doesn't have a playbook at the moment.
Does not, no.
Right? And we are all trying to figure it out. And individuals who are willing to find what that would look like and taking ownership of that and trying to seek answers out are the ones that can really bring the most value to that. So even if you don't have that experience, it shouldn't stop a person from thinking, oh, I don't have it, I'm not. Because there are companies out there, for example, at Blackbaud, where they're willing to see how motivated you are. Would you agree?
Oh, that's it right there. Exactly. Because like I said, this is the thing, we're talking about UX writing today. If you were interviewing me 2 years ago, we wouldn't be talking about UX writing. It really wasn't in the playbook yet. So UX writing is just the most recent example of, how the profession evolves and takes on, new responsibilities. So down the road, it's like, UX writing, that's yesterday's newspaper. Now I need conversation designers. There's always something new coming down the pike. And what you want to do is you want to make sure you've got folks who are willing to embrace that and evolve with it. So, like I said, UX writing is just the latest, greatest thing. But, my guess is 2 years from now, when we talk Zora, we'll be talking about, some other new thing we need to start embracing.
Exactly. And we have to be ready to pivot. And having a driven team will get you there.
Yep.
That's what I'm taking away from this conversation.
It's true. And, the nice thing is, too, going back to the UX writing thing, it's just been so cool to see our technical writers embrace it. Well, we still have the technical writer labels, but our folks are, unfortunately, what our writers are capable of doing is just so vast and so impressive. It's hard to label it, but the folks have just embraced the UX writing so much, and they've been enjoying it. It's been, again, because they like the evolution. It's like, okay, well, I've been doing this other kind of writing here for several years. I'm really good at it. I'm still doing it. I'm still enjoying it. But look, some part of my day, I get to do this. And they're really enjoying the fact that now they get to pivot for a few hours every day and do this. They love the close relationships that were, as a result of this, right? We've always had a good relationship with UX. Now our relationship with UX is even better. We've always had a good relationship with product management. Now it's even better. It's strengthened relationships. It's improving our product. So it's just such a great win.
It is a win-win. And I think you said it so beautifully that it has strengthened relationships. And this is a way for technical writers to sort of understand the contribution that they can bring to the table. So even if you're not applying for a job, if you see an opportunity in your company that you can sort of leverage and expand and present the value that your skill can bring, or if you want to stay in the same company but advance in your career, this is a way to show how you can pivot and what you can do with your profession and your skills to build those partnerships, to strengthen those relationships.
You mentioned at the beginning, you said, find a need in your company. I mean, if you are interested in staying with your company, and that's key. I mean, you have to find a need. If right now at Blackbaud, right, I can identify 10,000 needs. So finding a need that your company has is not probably going to be a difficult thing. Finding the solution might be, but looking to address, needs personally and seriously will definitely help your career.
I can definitely see that, why that would matter to the business. And my objective as part of this conversation is to, of course, help our listeners find their next big adventure. I call it an adventure because I think life is an adventure, but at the same time, elevating the profession and getting your seat at the table. And there's been a lot of talk about getting your seat at the table. As part of your professional development, you want to keep thinking, how can I get my seat at the table? What do I do to earn your seat at the table? Would you agree?
Oh, I agree 100%. Yeah.
Perfect. So, Denise, we've sort of talked about organically, the conversation just came up where you shared what sort of skill sets you're looking for on a resume. You don't want to have things that are stagnant. Is there anything else that you would like to add to that piece?
Nothing that I can think of. Stagnancy, like I said, I think, I did, not just stagnant, but I mean, you do have to be, show that you've got a knowledge about the field and that you are self-motivated and you're willing to pivot and embrace change. If you can demonstrate that in any way on your resume, that's always going to be a big win. And like I said, I used the coding examples before when we were talking, and I just really want to be clear. That's just an example, and it is extreme because I don't want folks to feel that, oh, you know what, I need to go to coding school to be a technical writer. You don't. As a matter of fact, the 2 writers that we hired that have coding skills so far really haven't even used those skills in their profession. It was what taking those classes and completing those classes demonstrated that was so impressive. So
that helps. That definitely helps. I mean, I think one of the questions that I was going to ask you was share an interesting story about a candidate or a resume that has stayed with you. The coding example is definitely sounds something that is an interesting part of the hiring process. Is there anything else that sort of has stayed with you that was different, unusual about a candidate?
Yeah, on the negative side, it's funny because when I saw the question, this was the first thing that popped in my head, so I figured it had to be the answer. And this was probably, I don't know, 3 years ago. We had an opening for a senior technical writer. I'm remote, even before we were all remote. I've worked remotely for Blackbaud for like the last, I think, 18 years. So it was a phone interview with a candidate in our New Hampshire office. This gentleman called me from a Walmart parking lot in his Beamer with the top down because he apologized. There was all this background noise. So he says, yeah, I apologize. And he made sure to tell me he was sitting in his Beamer, not his car. He said, yeah, I'm sitting in my Beamer out in a parking lot because I didn't want to do this interview at work. And the whole reason he took the interview is he wanted to explain to me what I needed. What the position that we had posted is not the position that's not going to satisfy Blackbaud's needs. This is what you need to do to satisfy Blackbaud's needs. And of course, he had all of the things that needed to that we're going to be required to satisfy our needs. So needless to say, that conversation ended in about 20 minutes and we never called him back. But that's the one has stayed with me the longest.
Wow.
What not to do in an interview.
What not to do in an okay. That's an interesting story. Definitely an interesting one. I mean, I can imagine, right?
Yeah.
With how that would go, how quickly it could go south.
And this is the bad thing, right? You ask that question and unfortunately it's not the good stuff that comes to mind immediately. It's the bad stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and it is important to know what not to do as well.
Well, it is. And know it will stay with people for a very long time because, missteps like this are just hard to put behind you.
That makes sense. I mean, you probably also remember the person's name. And if you encountered them.
I haven't encountered him again, but I'll never forget his name. So just know that too. It's like, it's seared in my brain. So yeah, that's another bad thing, right? You don't want to be remembered in that way.
Exactly. Good. Yeah. That absolutely valid point there. Now, I think this is a good segue. You said you've been remote for a long time. And I'm just curious, hiring as a remote manager for your team, has anything changed since the whole pandemic started?
Yes. I mean, since I've become a manager, all of my teams have been remote, but they were in offices. So that made it, a little bit easier because they were in an environment with other people, even though I wasn't there. But we always did the phone interviews as our first screening. But unfortunately, there's not an in-person interview. Back in the day, even though I was remote, the director would be on site and he would sit in on the interview, stuff like that. And then usually after we did hire somebody, and this was honestly my favorite part of the process is, I'd go and visit. So if the new hire was in our New Hampshire office, I'd go up to New Hampshire for a week after they started. If it was Charleston, I'd go down to Charleston for a week. And I really did. I really enjoyed it. I do miss that. I mean, even though I've been remote for 18 years, that part of it is, I kind of mourn for that part of it. The other thing is the onboarding process is a little bit more complicated now. Your experience was because you were actually onboarded remotely. But back in the day, right, you'd hire somebody, they'd be sitting in the Charleston office around all these people who knew everything. It didn't matter that I wasn't there. They were surrounded by people who knew stuff. Now they don't have that. So it's been a lot of time on the telephone with new folks getting them onboarded.
Yeah, we bring two different perspectives. And you asked, what was it for me? This was probably the first position that I was interviewing for being 100% remote. So I definitely had my own fears, and we had a video interview. And I don't know what David and Colleen were looking for in that video interview. But what actually amazed me was that there were no portfolios asked for. I didn't have to do any presentation. It was just a regular dialogue, not just a natural conversation. And at the end of it, a week later, Olivia got in touch with me and she said, you have this job. But definitely there is fear. There is like, what do I do and what do I not do on a video call? So that is my question to you. From your perspective, what don't you want me to do?
It's interesting you brought up the lack of portfolio. That's probably going to shock a lot of people, but we really don't. And that with our interviewing processes, we emphasize a lot more just like the personality and the performance of the individual and the conversations. You can't, in my opinion, it's a lot harder to fake it when you're talking, live in an interview or even in a video chit chat, right? If I start asking you, if I see, you've a lot of folks like to put that they have experience with DITA, which is, fairly complicated, very technical writing
Concept.
architecture. Yeah.
Right.
So, it's always kind of fun to start talking to people when you're interviewing them about, their work with DITA. And, 9 times out of 10, once you start scratching, you find out it's not that vast, right? However, if you ask them for a portfolio or samples of their writing, they've got no problem putting these things together and showing you what they did here and what they did there. And, maybe at the end of the day, maybe it shows you that they know how to write, but there's no way for us even to confirm that they wrote it. So I'm not saying I'm not that cynical about, what people are doing, but I think you learn a lot more through the actual, the verbal intercourse you have in an interview than you're going to learn through any portfolio.
So is there anything, again, so we are talking about the things not to do for somebody that is being interviewed. What would give them away? And we are not trying to say, hey, hide yourself, but from your perspective, how do they come prepared for this conversation?
Well, read the job description, number one. So, in our job description, we mention on our authoring tool, we mention our dev environment. So, when we bring up things like, oh, are you familiar with MATCAP Flare? Are you familiar with the agile development process? And they're scratching their head like, oh, I've never heard those words before. Then, they didn't even really read the job description. Okay, so don't get tripped up by not reading the job description. And the other thing I would be, everybody's going to exaggerate resumes, but be prepared because you're probably going to be asked questions. And especially if you're really selling yourself on something very technical. Those are usually the things that stand out the most to me when I'm looking at a resume. And I use the DITA example just because it's gotten to the point where I don't know that I get a resume that doesn't mention DITA. Not that we're even looking for somebody that, knows or has worked in a DITA environment, except that it is topic based and we do that. But then nobody seems to be able to answer the hard questions when you start actually talking about DITA. So, be prepared. No, you're probably going to be asked questions about what you put on your resume. So, be comfortable talking about it.
Yeah, naturally. And so in your opinion, have there been any red flags, just like the interesting story that you shared about that call, as you were having these video calls, anything that a candidate did that sort of showed a red flag to you?
That's a good question. I'm sure there have been. I can't think of any right now, other than, not being able to answer a question that was either addressed in the job description or that they put on their resume. But beyond that, I can't think of a red flag.
Does the nervousness come through on a video call?
Yeah, it really does. And it's amazing the degree of nervousness that folks deal with too. We've had some candidates that, we thought were really going to be strong candidates. And, this is the thing, they may have been, but their inability to communicate during the video interview just kind of crashed their chances, especially when you've got really, really good, strong candidates out there. So, yeah, that is unfortunate, but it will affect really negatively your chances.
So any suggestions for those kind of scenarios?
No, I really, I think if you're just a really nervous person, I don't know what you do about that. I'd like to say that if you're comfortable with what you have on your resume and you're comfortable with the position that you're applying for, that you're not going to be nervous. But I really don't think that's the case, because some of the folks that we've dealt with that were really very nervous, I didn't really experience any red flags regarding their ability, their tech, their skills. But at the same time, right, this is believe it or not, this is kind of a social job these days. We're an agile company. Everybody is embedded in development teams. You really have to be able to communicate with your developers. You have to be able to communicate with the UX person. We're now the UX writers. So communication is key, and especially video communication now that we're remote. So it's become not a nice to have, but a requirement for our job. And you can be the best candidate in the world, but if you can't talk, it's just not going to work out.
That is so very important. Mm-hmm. It's a soft skill that you need, and how we've had to pivot. And this is one of those areas where I knew that what would I need to do to sort of pivot and figure out how to communicate. And we've all had to do that, not just me. So from your perspective, it's good to know that, yeah, that is important, because how else do you get your information? And like you said, it is becoming a social job these days. And, there is this perception when I share with people I know, when I say I'm doing technical writing, they think it's a very siloed job. I'm just sitting at my desk writing away, but it's not that. And what you brought to light is communication with your developers and your other stakeholders is absolutely what is going to give you that content that you need to write. Otherwise, you have no content to write.
Oh, exactly. And otherwise, you're just kind of sidelined in the process. And again, I can't emphasize this enough when it comes to the UX writing. I mean, that is so interactive, as you know, right? I mean, from the office hours to, what's happening at the triad with the UX designer. I mean, it is interactive. So if you do plan to wear the UX writer hat, your communication skills need to be top notch.
That is super, super awesome. Denise, we've covered quite a bit of ground here. And from my perspective, I think we've hit some really hard questions here. Is there anything that you would like to add to this conversation?
No, not that I can think of. I think we did cover everything pretty thoroughly. So I can't think of anything to add.
Yeah, I'm looking at my list of questions here, and I think we've gone through pretty much everything. And we are coming up on top of the hour. And I really, really appreciate this fascinating conversation with you.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. This has been a lot of fun, Zora. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Denise. Have a lovely Sunday.
Thanks, you too.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the podcast on your favorite app, including Apple, Google, or Spotify. Follow me on LinkedIn or visit us at www.insidetechcom.show for the latest updates. Catch you on another episode.